Welcome to the Pulse podcast, where we explore the latest trends in workplace innovation, technology, and healthcare equipment, from artificial intelligence to business transformation. I'm Kate Georgiana, a program manager here at DLL, and your host for today's episode. Today, we're bringing you a global perspective on innovation in life sciences. And joining me are two DLL Life Sciences financing representatives from a different side of the Atlantic. From the UK, we have Rachel Drage, a sales development representative specializing in life sciences. And from the US, we're joined by Alex Johnson, the country sales manager for healthcare. Rachel and Alex bring unique insights from Europe and North America on how financing is helping life science organizations overcome challenges. Rachel and Alex, thank you for joining me today. Before we dive into today's topic, can you tell the listeners a little bit about yourselves?
Yeah, of course. Thanks for the intro, Kate. So, my background is actually in biomedical sciences. So, I've been with DLL for coming up to 2 years now as a sales development rep. But prior to that, I was studying at university, and that was in biomedical sciences. I was involved in various research projects, both academically and in extracurricular opportunities as well. And it was really those experiences that sparked my passion for the innovation in life sciences. So, as I mentioned before starting with DLL, I was studying. So, this is actually my first professional role, and it's been really rewarding seeing how DLL are involved really in allowing companies in the life sciences sector to gain access to their capital. And I think that's what's exciting me most about this role at the moment.
It's a pretty unique journey. Did you ever see yourself in financing, or now that you're in financing, you feel like the dots are all connecting and this feels like the right fit for you?
Finance is not something I really saw myself in, but purely because during my studies, the business side of things wasn't really touched upon. It was very much purely based on the academia and the research of everything. So when I had sort of the recruitment of DLL reach out to me on LinkedIn, I wanted to give it a go. I thought it'd be quite interesting to see where finance really fits into this. And so it was a bit of a learning curve when I started, definitely getting used to the terminology. It's a completely different sector for me. But yeah, it's quite nice to see how well it fits in, to see how without the financing side of things to provide that access to the capital, the research can't really be done and without the equipment. So yeah, it's a nice mix.
Awesome. Thanks, Rachel. And how about you, Alex?
Great. Thanks. Hi, Kate. And Rachel, great to hear your story. Always interesting to hear how a scientist transitions into finance. So nice to hear that story. So yeah, just in terms of my background, I've spent over 20 years in strategic sales and financing within life sciences. Before joining DLL, I spent 11 years at Waters Corporation, where I initially had the opportunity to start their global financing organization. Later transitioned into a commercial leadership role, managing product sales and service into the clinical markets. And prior to Waters, I worked at Thermo Fisher Scientific for 10 years in their global financial services team.
So you have a little bit of both life sciences and financing in your background. So that's a perfect segue here to talk about how can financing fit in with life sciences, and maybe share a little bit from what both of your perspective is on what you're seeing.
That's a really great question, and honestly, perfect timing for this conversation. I've recently had the opportunity to attend a major life sciences industry event in the U.S. It was great reconnecting with old colleagues, seeing some of the new technology. But it was really had some eye-opening conversations with some of the folks there. A lot of challenges right now, especially in the U.S. market. Tight budgets. We're seeing rapid innovation cycles driven by AI, and there's constant pressure to scale up. Not to mention the biggest topic of the week, which was tariffs. So it really underscored how crucial flexible financing solutions are in helping these organizations stay current and continue their important work. And certain business climate in the U.S. is less than optimal. Academic research organizations are grappling with new funding requirements and restrictions. Early stage pharma and biotech companies are finding it increasingly difficult to secure financing. Municipal and state-owned organizations are struggling to keep up with the pace of innovation due to tight budgets, and this is just to name a few. Rachel, what are you seeing in the market?
That's really interesting to see your side of things of how the challenges you're experiencing in the US. I would say it's quite similar in the UK. Obviously, I'm speaking purely from a UK perspective, but from what I've read, there's quite a lot of similarities elsewhere in Europe as well, not just with the US. But the biggest observation of mine would be that the UK is brilliant at starting up businesses in the life science sector, whereas when it comes to scale ups, we're seeing a bit of a disparity and a bit of a drop. So in the UK, we have a lot of programs to help with startup businesses, whether it's the British Business Bank loans or Innovate UK. There's a lot of schemes and investment in there, lots of series fundings. When it comes to scale-ups, you are still eligible for some of these series fundings, but a lot of people struggle to make it on their own. So there's a bit of reliance on investments and being bought out by big pharma as well. But this is where I think, from DLL's perspective, that's really where financing can come into play. We can help extend people's cash runways, which will enable them to scale up their businesses. And hopefully within time, we'll see less of a drop between that massive amount of startups in the sector and a smaller amount of scale-ups.
Now, we kind of touched on it a bit, focusing on growth, innovation, and stability here. Do either of you have maybe a real life example you can share about how we've implemented financing into our customers to really support that innovation, growth, and stability for them?
Yeah, I don't mind taking the lead on this one. So funnily enough, I attended an event quite recently with one of my colleagues, Dharmesh, in central London. So it was a research and innovation event. So there's a real mix of individuals that attended, ranging from manufacturing companies selling their equipment and reagents to academia and startups and scale-ups. And we, by pure chance, met with a company that were actually looking to scale up. And this is where I was mentioning how DLL can really support those businesses by extending their cash runways. So the customer was not too familiar with the benefits of financing, especially in the life science sector. It's not something we see a lot. Like, even with my background, finance was nothing I was taught about. It was purely, we always focused on the science of everything. And so he'd acquired quite a few rounds of series funding of grant funding, but they were really looking to extend that cash runway with the latest piece of equipment that they needed for their lab, and they were looking to expand their lab facilities. So I think it was quite a gradual process that eventually, but this is relatively recent, so this is like the first step for their lab expansion, and we've actually been able to do one deal for them so far with some protein analysis equipment, which has been really great to see.
Do you feel like you're taking your customers and your partners on a journey in the life sciences to bring them along of how financing can really play a key role in what their goals are?
Yeah, I really do think it's such a journey for, especially for these companies in this industry, like I said, not being too exposed to it previously. Um, but the benefits of it needs to be highlighted, in my opinion. It's not just allowing people to extend their cash runway so they could do the research, but it's also talent acquisition. Especially we'll find in science parks, for instance, those that invest in the latest, newest, coolest equipment will attract a lot of different people from everywhere.
Thank you for sharing that. Alex, what about you? Any real life experiences you can share with us here?
Yeah, I think over my long career, as I get older, I have a couple of pretty good examples where we're able to help customers, especially in the life sciences space. And I think these examples really highlight our customized approach at DLL. So, a couple of years back, I worked with a diagnostics reference organization that was expanding their business, expanding into new markets, trying to gain additional customers. So they need to scale quickly to keep up with the new business, but they didn't want to drain the cash reserves they had on hand. So, in this case, this was a large fleet of equipment that they were trying to run. So we developed this multi-phase fleet management plan. We included the service consumables in the overall plan. And this really aligned really well with how their new business came in the door and their revenue projections, but also helped them, kind of keep cash on hand so they could pay their employees, keep the lights on and everything else. So, the approach that we brought to them was a game changer. It really gave them the confidence to grow without, compromising their financial health. Another example I'd mention is, one I was really proud of because I think it really made a difference was, working with a state-owned hospital laboratory. The lab was faced with really outdated technology. The technology was nearing the end of life, and they faced significant challenges in providing timely patient test results due to the frequent hardware downtime, and ultimately the risk of catastrophic failures with this equipment due to unavailability of parts. So the lab needed to replace 3 of these systems. Unfortunately, they only had the fiscal budget for 1. So that's how state agencies are funded. They're funded on a yearly basis. So in their mind, they could only replace that one system. But we were able to come back to them with a financial solution that said, hey, you can replace all 3 systems today and just pay for them over the next 3 years. This was really, a conversation that changed the game, enabled them to get to their goals of really providing patient care to the standard that they wanted, and was a real win for us and the sales team to get this across the finish line.
We can all maybe relate to sitting in a hospital waiting room and just waiting for results to come through. So that's a perfect example of the way financing can actually make the customer experience, both from our end user and from then their end user, a little bit smoother and better. So thanks, Alex, for sharing. So before we kind of wrap up, I just wanted to ask you each, if there's one thing a life sciences business could take from listening from this episode, what would it be? Rachel, do you want to start? Like, what would be your one piece of advice and takeaway here?
I think that's a really great question. I'd probably say that people shouldn't underestimate the power of finding the right financial partner. Financing isn't always just about the money, it's about the strategy, flexibility, and ultimately having someone support your long-term goals. And this is why it's really a journey with DLL.
Alex, what about you?
Sure. So, it's really finding the right financial solution for each individual customer. There's really no one size fits all approach when it comes to funding, financing, leasing. So it's really important to understand what the goals of the customer are and respond to those in a way that helps solve some of these bigger problems, related to funding. However, discussing financing, discussing payment options, discussing payment in general can be really a tricky part of the sales process. So this is a real great opportunity to, get your DLL financial consultant involved early, help facilitate that conversation with the procurement departments, with the finance professionals, even with CFOs. Really our goal is not to let money be the reason for not moving forward. So, engaging early, having those conversations, understanding what the challenges are and respond to those accordingly is really important.
Yeah, awesome. I think that's great advice. And I think that can span really for anyone listening here is how can we help really smooth the process for the end user. Thank you, Alex and Rachel, for the discussion. We've covered so many great topics here. If you'd like to stay connected to the world of healthcare, subscribe to The Bridge, DLL's newsletter on LinkedIn. You can find the link in the show notes. Stay tuned for another exciting episode of the Pulse Podcast.
This podcast is brought to you by DLL Group. All rights reserved. This podcast is for general information purposes only and should not be used as a substitute for professional advice. The opinions expressed in this podcast are solely those of the participants. Nothing herein should be construed as legal, tax, financial, accounting, or investment advice. Please visit www.dllgroup.com/aboutus for further details.